So, you know, as we start, can you just say your name and what you do?
My name is Marc Nobleman. I am an author. I wrote a book called Bill the Boy Wonder, the secret co-creator of Batman, which was the first step in this larger campaign to get Bill Finger's name added to Batman.
So what drew you to Bill's story?
I'm sorry?
I said what drew you to Bill's story initially? You know, what kind of inspired you to start up the book and, you know, get this a little bit more publicly, you know, recognized?
I was a superhero fan since I was a kid, and a writer by trade, so it was inevitable that those two things would intersect at some point, and eventually I would find a superhero story to write about. And in this case, it ended up being nonfiction, not fiction. And I was drawn to it not only because I was a fan, but because it's hard to imagine a story behind a character this iconic that remained this untold as long as it did. But here I am in the mid-2000s and no one had written a book about Bill Finger. He'd had a few articles and that's it, not even a mainstream article. It was unthinkable. Any other character, it's unthinkable. So it was not heavy lifting to get me onto this story.
How did you find out about it in the first place?
I don't remember. All I know is that as of college, so early 90s, I had not heard the name Bill Finger. And I know that because my friends and I, back then when we were immature, and of course I'm completely mature now, but back then we lived in a suite of 6 in college, and to annoy each other and waste time, we would leave messages on each other's answering machines. You guys probably don't even know what an answering machine is, but that used to be a thing. And just to fill up tape, one time I told my friend the story of the origin of Batman, and I still have this tape. And I was going on and on about Bob Kane. I didn't mention Bill Finger. So all I know is it was sometime after I graduated college, and it might have been the Wizard article in the early 2000s that was written by Jim McLaughlin. That might have been the first time I'd heard the name, but I can't say for sure.
I mean, what was it like when you reached out to Athena Figure to continue to pursue this? Because from her point of view, like, she was really distraught to the point where, you know, she didn't want him to do this, but you kind of kept on. I wouldn't say egged, but you were really persistent.
No, I know, I egged. And she wasn't distraught at first because I didn't know her at all. All that happened was, at the beginning, was I reached out to her through her MySpace page, and again, you guys probably don't even know what that is, right?
Oh, no, we
know how young you are. Okay, I'm just giving you the benefit of the doubt that you're young guys. And that was in the morning, and she called me that night. I had put my number in the message, and you know, this part of this might be my memory coloring it, but I felt like it was like this tentative dance beginning. It was like Beauty and the Beast, like you're hesitant, you're not sure how to approach this, because I knew that she was so important, but I didn't want to scare her off or just turn her off to me in general, because she could have just said, dude, I'm not interested. And she really said, actually, I'm not interested. I mean, I want to hear what you've learned, but I don't want to pursue anything. It's just too big. And I had to say, look, I know I'm new in your life and that you don't know me at all, but I really think that this is something that you should think about. So I didn't learn about the family situation until it was actually weeks after that. And you'll see that in the movie. Athena talks about that in the movie.
And now, Michael, how did you become involved with this?
1963 or 64. I was one of the first members of organized comic book fandom, and an initial subscriber to a fanzine called Batmania. And in the pages of Batmania, the publisher, a wonderful guy named Bill Joe White, had Professor Jerry Bales from Wayne State University, who was considered the founding father of comic book fandom, do an interview with Bill Finger. And they published an article for the first time ever explaining who this guy was and documenting his process in the creation of Batman. So as a 12 or 13-year-old, I was like mesmerized by this. It was a stunning revelation because I had only known the Bob Kane name from the comic books. Well, it was 1 or 2 issues after that they published a rebuttal letter from Bob Kane that as a 12 or 13-year-old scared me. I mean, it was volcanic. It was threatening. It was powerful, and I said, whoa, there is something really strange and earth-shaking going on here. So that's how far back it goes for me. And around that same time, I started writing letters to the editor of Batman Comics, a wonderful man named Julius Schwartz, probably the most important editor in the history of comics, saying, okay, who really writes and draws Batman? I don't think it really is Bob Kane, is it? And he would send me back a note to every letter I would pester him with, going, I can't talk about that, or you'll have to ask Bob Kane himself. I mean, he was being completely evasive. And that made me even more curious to get to the bottom of it. And then I think through my years in comic book fandom and the investigative reporters, the amateur investigative reporter fans, Comic-Con discussions, you know, it all bit by bit came out to the light, and I am probably, possibly, one of the last people standing on Earth who met Bill Finger. I met Bill Finger 3 times when I was 13, 14 years old. I also knew Bob Kane, and I knew Jerry Robinson, who I call the triumvirate of the team that created or co-created everything Batman we pretty much know to this day. So I have an interesting, straight from the horse's mouth kind of perspective on it all.
Now, how has that informed, you know, you're the producer on many Batman films. How has that informed kind of your work with the character to this day?
Well, I think very much. And I want to specifically compliment the management at DC Comics and at Warner Brothers, because if they didn't want this to happen, or if they didn't care if it happened, it wouldn't have happened. Despite all the noble efforts by Mr. Nobleman. I mean, he was a one-man show. He set the fireworks going. A lot of people have joined in over the years to help. Jerry Robinson was very, very important because he was there at the beginning. He was Bob Kane's first assistant and first ghost artist in 1939. And he was there in the sessions as to who created or co-created what, largely. So, of course, it has to have an impact. And especially having met the guy and talked to the guy and heard from his mouth about things like this, it leaves a lifelong impression on a kid.
You guys, I'm going to have to pull them right to this